The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Business Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
This is The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. All comments, views, and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host, guest, and its callers. It's time for The Growth Strategist. Here's your host, Aldana Ambler.
Welcome to the show. This is The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. And each week we rotate through different growth strategies and industries and locations for mid-market companies. You know, the guests, the host, and the listeners are all presidents and CEOs of companies between 20 and 200 million, and most of you have that billion-dollar mark in the back of your minds, even if you don't want to admit it to some of your employees that go, well, you want what by when? So this is a unique show. We're not talking about general public. We're not aiming at little bitty, tiny little companies that are trying to figure out what they should do today to start. Although I have some listeners that are, in small companies, and stay on there, because if you hear where you're going, it does prevent a lot of problems. Our audience also has some presidents, division heads of large corporations, and I keep wondering if you're listening because you identify yourself as this entrepreneur, or if you're getting ready to bolt and create your own company. I'd love to have some emails from some of you guys to hear what are you listening for and what do you want and how can we help you better. Anyway, enough said. Today is an exciting show. What we're talking about is the idea of keep on doubling. Now, several of you who have listened to the program before know that I have what I call the triple-double option. It's a great test in your strategic planning. Just ask yourself the premise, what would we do if we wanted to triple the size of the company? It just changes the dynamic from thinking about incremental change and how do we tweak this and how do we just get a little more profitability and how do we just survive. It asks the tough question, if we wanted to triple, how would we do it? And it opens you up to things like acquisitions. It opens you up to looking at where your executive team may need to go and the need for an executive team. It opens you up to look at capitalization. It opens you up to looking at training. It really, scares some people, but it opens up strategic questions. And the reason I call it a triple-double option is that just because you triple in volume doesn't mean that you made money, doesn't mean that it worked, and it's important to have the other piece. So it's at that minimum you can at least double your profit, or at minimum you could cut your labor expenses in half, get the benefit of scale. So your strategy is, all right, marketing and sales and product-wise, could we triple? But what could we cut in half? And it could be the number of locations. It could be the number of customers. It could be the cost of labor. See it? And if you can do those kinds of things, you might be able to, quote, double your net. Those use the ratios to open up questions. It's very exciting. So I was looking for somebody who's lived this journey, and there's lots of people that are. A lot of them are on the Inc. 500. And what's interesting about the Inc. 500 is, that maybe about a third of them keep growing. And my guest is going to be corroborating this. It's interesting. He's seen the same observation. And about a third of them stabilize. There's set points. There's plateaus they hit. And they're very predictable. A lot of them are at about 10 million. And there's another plateau at about 20 million, particularly for distributors. And then, there's about a third of them that have to contract because, maybe they had a rapid growth. Maybe they were lucky with something. They were right place, right time, and took off. But they didn't deal with the implications of the triple-double questions. All right, so we're going to change a little bit. The gentleman I'm going to be introducing in a few minutes believes in doubling. Hey, same premise, folks. It's to ask the tough questions about what could you do to double. And just the premise of saying to yourself, we're going to keep on doubling. Now think about that. All right, you hit 10 million, which is less than most of the listeners. And you're not satisfied with that. There's something else that you need to do. So most of you have gone through that question of, all right, so the first people I hired as managers, there's usually two phrases for descriptors for who they were. Cheap and loyal, otherwise known as relatives and friends. And you run into the limitations of what that means. Because if they didn't have the advanced degrees that you needed, they didn't have the experience, or they're too intimidated by you to stand up to you and actually have a decent argument with you about business strategy, or whatever it was that happens when your lead thing is cheap and loyal. You've had to go through that to get to 10 million, most people. Most people have had to deal with that. The bookkeeper who thinks the one right system of accounting is high tech is probably gone by now. So partly what I want you to think about is, what have you already lived through to get to the doubling from 10 to 20? I find in the people I'm interviewing on this show, it's very striking. This is the 6th year of the program. Plus, I've had over 800 clients from my strategic planning company. I'm finding there's a maturation that happens between 10 and 20 million that is stunning. If I goof and I put somebody on the radio that's still at the $10 million mark, every single time I find that they describe their company as though everything's perfect and they know what they're doing. They haven't even figured out what they don't know yet. And they still claim a lot of the progress as them personally. I find the guests who are at the $20 million mark, the humility has happened. There's this realization that it's through other people. There is more candor about, here's the things that we're struggling with and here's what we're trying to figure out. There is a recognition that this is a complex puzzle that people are working on to double. So what does that mean to you? Think about it. If you've been living through that, you know what I'm talking about. You're at the point where you're saying, I've got a CEO, I've got a controller. I don't know if this person's going to be able to be a CFO. I've got some cash needs, and I've got something I want to do that takes some capitalization. Am I ready for a venture capitalist to help fund this thing? And if I do, that person's going to want to have 1 or 2 seats on my board. Ooh, that's loss of control. And the next question is, what board? And then you're looking at things like, is the core company enough, or do I have to spin off a second business? Am I going to be specialized in what we've been doing before, or am I going to be redefining the niche for our business? Are we ready to compete against the truly big companies? See, those are the kind of questions you ask between 10 and 20, right? And that's why a lot of you even listen to this program. You're sitting at your laptop late at night, and you're doing your last round of email, and you're looking for answers on the Internet to what those kind of questions sound like. Now, here's where we're going today. Those are your questions today. Would you be asking a different set of questions, or would you be looking at it a different way? If instead of worrying about your ability to be president, turn into CEO, instead of wondering if the existing person could or couldn't, what if you posed it as, all right, we're going to create a $40 million business. What does the $40 million business need? Take it out of body. What does a $40 million business need? What's the difference? You may need to study some $40 million companies. Take a look at the people in your industry, people in related companies. Do some research. Instead of starting from the inside out, it may need to be an outside in. What do the companies that are competing with the big guys do? What kind of budget does a $40 million company have? What kind of financing do the ones that make it have? Look on the list of the Inc. 500 at the ones that continue to grow. What are the titles of the people on their website? How are they structured? What business model are they using? You follow where I'm going? Because you could revert back, especially 20 million is a plateau. In a large one of the large reasons it is because those self-doubt questions really dominate an awful lot of people in the role. One of the biggest doubt questions that happens is, okay, I've got the house on the hill overlooking the lake. I drive a nice car. I've paid off the kids' tuition. It's time for me. Why should I risk all of this and take such big chances on promoting people, expanding, getting venture capital, going through all that? Is it really worth it for me to become a CEO? Why should I do that? That's the doubt. Some people don't want to say it out loud, but that's what's going on. And you become risk adverse at a key time when big decisions need to be looked at. Again, what would happen if in your strategic planning room, okay, make sure you have one, and you're looking, even if it's a management team that seems a little bit behind and not able to tackle these things, you pose, let's double. Even if they're scared and they don't know how to answer the question at first, you can find out together. You'll see through their reactions whether or not they're motivated to grow. You'll see through their reactions if they're motivated to learn. You'll see through your reactions to how you interact with them if they're going to be enough for you in the next step. It's very educational. It's very eye-opening, not just for where the company needs to go, but for career decisions that individuals need to make. And I've seen people opt for staying in the controller role and don't even want to be promoted to being a CFO. And they're so relieved nobody shoved them into it. It's a very different career track. I'm going to say it again. It's a very different career track. Just like going from president to CEO is a much bigger decision than folks who are outside looking in at it have any idea. It's a career decision, not just a business decision. And the double option, just saying how are we going to double, is about the business first. You take care of the organic living being of the business first, and then ask the career decisions. And that's one of the biggest changes that people go through, is early on in a business, and you've lived through this, it was about what you like to do, where you wanted to spend your time, how much money you wanted to make, how much investment you were willing to do. By the time you get at that $20 million mark, the business has a life of its own, doesn't it? And taking care of that organic living being separate from you and asking the career questions for each of the people, including you, is challenging. Okay, let's say you've faced all this. You got to the 40, and by the time people hit the $40 million mark, they've had to deal, most of them, from the ones I've seen, have had to deal with financing from a different source. I mean, at least some private, there's ESOPs that happened by then. That's what we did. 33 partners was easier than having one, in my opinion, for me. You've looked at different sources of money. You have different levels of negotiations with banks. Your management team has to sound very different at $40 million, or it's too fragile. There's complicated questions about what's your CRM system. Now I'm going to pose the question that most of you have not heard, and that's what this show is really focused on. All right, what if you say, we're going to double from 40 to 80. Our guest is at $75 million, and they just came out with their 5-year plan to go double again. So I want you to really listen to this man and ask yourself now, how are the questions different from 40 to 80? How are they different from 80 to 160? And the structure I want you to use in listening to this and thinking about yourself is the combination of, and it's a simple model. It's from the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. If you haven't read that by Vern Harnish, go back and read it. He's a great consolidator of other people's ideas and, really puts it in a really clear, concise manner. It's the blend that's the mix, the synergy between strategy, execution, people, and cash. He calls it cash, and just call it money. Strategy, execution, people, and cash. And so our interview today will be going through those 4 segments. How, when you go from 40 to 80, do you attack strategy questions, execution questions, people questions, money questions? And then what happens from 80 to 160? So I want to introduce our guest so that I don't leave you in suspense much longer. This is a truly cool guy. Phil, I mess up his name, and I'm going to try it again. Harigi?
Harigi, that is perfect.
I did it, Harigi. See, I've met this man, and I think he's fabulous. He's the CEO of Sabre Systems, and how I met him was that he's won. Phil, you've won something like 8 times to be on the Philadelphia 100, right?
Yes.
And so you're the first inductee into the Philadelphia Business Hall of Fame. Am I hearing that right?
That is true, in the Philadelphia 100 Hall of Fame. Yes.
That is so cool. The other people get on that list one time and they carry it their whole life as though it's a banner, but they can't do it again.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge, and I think your introduction is spot on in that many companies have a lot of early success, and really maybe fool themselves into a false sense of security in looking at what they need to do to continue that success for the future.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they look in the rearview mirror rather than sort of looking ahead to see how they're going to have to change and transform in order to keep that success going.
Well, the front view is scary. I want to make sure, before we take a break, I want to make sure they know what your business does. I mean, this Sabre Systems is a kind of a multitasking group. I mean, it's technology, science, management, project management. You do government defense contracts, and you're in 35 states and several countries. I mean, this is a complicated business you run. Yeah,
it's a very broad business, and but the The elevator description for what we do is we are an IT and engineering consulting firm that does most of its work with the federal government, and most people that do know us from the work that we do with the Department of Defense and primarily the Navy, even though we do have other customers within DOD and civilian agencies, and some work locally in the Philadelphia area in the commercial market.
Well, you're pretty ambitious. I mean, you're at $75 million and 600-plus employees, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'm going to take a break, and we're going to come back and hear a little bit about your journey, because how you get to this point and your mindset of doubling every year is one of the things we have to start with, okay? Let's take a break. This is The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. We will be right back.
Stocks, bonds, investment opportunities, financial news, and talk. We can help. Call us now toll-free, 866-472-5790, 866-472-5790, Voice America Business Network.
If you're a struggling business trying to get to the next plateau and would like to learn more about what Aldana can do for you, log on to thegrowthstrategist.com. Listen to some of our many satisfied clients.
We called in the Growth Strategist to do a strategic analysis of our company, design an organizational structure, and improve our management team. The important point is that Aldana Ambler gets it. Her extensive experience coaching fast-growth companies has really paid off for us.
Aldana played a key role in driving the rapid growth of our company. We now have a strategic growth plan in place, obtained growth financing, have a stronger management team, and expanded our services, and are already seeing profits. Companies dealing with business growth issues couldn't ask for a better or wiser business advisor than Aldana Ambler.
What are you waiting for? Call 1-888-ALDANA today and see where your business can go tomorrow. Once again, that number is 1-888-ALDONNA. TheGrowthStrategist.com. Achieving accelerated growth with sustained profitability.
Zoom Leadership. It's the big picture issues of the day, up close and personal capabilities of leadership, and a desirable future of constant renewal. Zoom Leadership. It's the economic crisis made clear, patterns and perspectives of leadership, and the importance of changing the way we pursue our future. Join host John Schmidt every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Zoom Leadership. An inside look at what's really going on in business, government, and civil society. Tune in every week on the Voice America Business Channel. Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You're logged on to The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. Call in right now with your questions and comments toll free at 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. Now let's jump into another segment of The Growth Strategist. Here's Aldana Ambler.
Welcome back to the show. This is the Growth Strategist, Aldana Ambler. And today we have Phil Hervey, and he's so cool. I mean, this is the CEO of Sabre Systems, and the topic that we're talking about is how do you keep on doubling? So this guy's got this mentality, and he's at that 75 million mark, headed to 80, and figuring out the 160. I love it. So you and I have met a couple places, Philadelphia 100 kind of conferences, but again, you know, we're both on the CEO think tank board. So we get to talk with Cheryl Beth Cookler about her event, her organization. It's very exciting. So we've met there. You said something on the break you wanted to tell us, and I said, why don't you just say it on the air?
Okay, sure. Well, when you were going through your introduction and talking about different companies that go through their different stages and maybe, you know, different realizations and aha moments at $10 million, $20 million, it sort of mirrors some of the points that I've made in some of the speaking engagements that I've given to places at Wharton and Temple. So I could really relate to a lot of the points that you were making.
That figured because our backgrounds are so similar, you know, in growing the companies. And, you know, you can't help but see it's like almost the maturation of the entrepreneur, you know, is one of the big pieces, you know.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges that, you know, the job description changes as you grow. You know, certainly when you're a startup and, you know, your background, and in my case, was a technical background, but I actually had a degree in finance, so I had a little bit of, you know, the financing and, you know, that end of it pretty well covered, but I didn't really have a marketing or sales background. That's something that I had to acquire,
But now think about that, though. If you're finance undergrad at Notre Dame in 1980, okay, and your MBA is at Temple, correct? Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
All right, but that's different from a lot of people who went into a technology company. Most of them, were, say, engineers, systems integrators themselves.
Correct.
And to be the president of it, they might not have had the MBA. So at least you had the career direction in your education.
Yeah, I think that was helpful early on because I understood, especially when you're going out for financing, I could talk balance sheets, I can talk P&L, I could talk, sort of like you really need to understand their language because they're rather dispassionate about you. You may be very excited about your dream, your vision, for your company, but the cold reality is, they really look at things like return on investment and margin and EBITDA and valuations and.
Oh, they speak, accountees. It's a different language.
Right.
Yeah.
And
did you know, your career-wise, did you know you were going to be an entrepreneur? What did you think you were going to be doing?
No. I actually, when I came out of college, I actually thought I was going to go into healthcare administration. And that's actually when I went to get my MBA. It was with the idea in mind that most of the fields or the positions available in healthcare administration, you're really required an MBA to start. So I was getting my degree at night at Temple, but obviously I was, needing some form of income. So I happened to be fortunate enough to get a job in the defense industry with, for a defense contractor. And the way things turned, I just never left the industry. And
were you always an independent, or were you an employee at first?
I was an employee. I was a W-2 employee for a large software contractor in the area, and then had an opportunity to go to a small business, and that was interesting because coming from a large business and then going to a small business that was below that $10 million mark, I really got to see.
There's a big difference, isn't there?
Yeah, very big difference. When you go from the typical, what you would consider, the company that that fits the military-industrial complex prototype to really a family-owned business.
See, that's one of the tricky things I find in staffing is, do you have it led by someone who's seen the big and knows how to create it, or do you have it led by the entrepreneur that, the entrepreneurial types of small people who might be more inquisitive and create what their company needs? That's tricky.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, looking at what a big company does, how they do business, how they got there, how they capitalized. What are the market, what are the strategic market decisions that they made, and that changes, and even the big public companies that are in our business, and those include companies like Lockheed Martin, L3Com, they all have had to sort of like change with the tides, and as national priorities shift and and defense budgets shift. So companies, even at the larger sizes, always have to, be constantly assessing where they are and where they need to go.
So when you did Sabre Systems, it was, okay, I've been in a large company, I've been in a small company, let's do our own?
That pretty much. I was sort of like looking at the practice that I was building for this small company and realized that for the most part I was really kind of working independently in terms of building my own practice, and I thought, well, gee, I could really do this on my own, and I got some encouragement actually from some of my own customers that you should be doing this on your own.
Same thing. Customers are the ones that see it sometimes. How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, well, we just this past year in 2009 celebrated our 20-year anniversary.
20 years. Okay, so 20 years ago. Now I want to know where the doubling mentality came from, because when you listen to your background, not everybody that has, the finance undergrad, worked for the government, not just think about that, has the entrepreneurial mentality to double periodically, pretty quickly. In 20 years, you've gotten to, close to 80 million now. Where did that come from?
I'll be honest with you. That was a little bit, that came on a little bit by need. People in the Philadelphia area may remember from the mid-'90s the base closings that affected the Navy Yard.
Right.
And there was probably a time when I started the business that I probably would have been very content to basically build what I would call a lifestyle business, where you kind of get to a certain size and
you make good money and you have fun.
Draw a salary and draw some earnings out of the company and be very content to be at a certain level. Mm-hmm. But the Navy customer that we had in Bucks County was targeted to basically move 200 miles south to southern Maryland. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of like the wake-up call. Gosh, I was very happy to have basically one large customer, mm-hmm. and now that customer is moving, and a lot of the specific individuals are going to get early retirement, find other career opportunities. The company's not going to survive unless it somehow finds a way to adapt.
In some kind of ways, a big account will wake you up to something that you need to see.
Yeah, and I think that's when I realized that, gosh, you just can't, really be complacent in this business. And I was relatively young. I had still at the time, relatively young children, 2 in school and actually a newborn, and realized that for the first time, it's a grow or die business in our industry.
Your clients, your industry, needed you to do something different. That's that whole outside-in versus inside-out thinking.
I think that's true. I mean, obviously there's a commitment to staying on top of the technology, mm-hmm. But there's also, when you have a predominantly services industry, if you're not growing, then you're not really providing opportunities mm-hmm. for your good people. And I think that is really where, I'll say where a lot of my motivation comes from mm-hmm. in growing, is because I really get, turned on when I see some of our people experience career growth within Sabre, and I realize that's really what kind of excites me is to to be able to provide a lot of value to our customers that are involved in high national priority programs.
Yeah, let's do that topic first, the people thing, because boy, do I agree with you, because developing the management consulting strategic planning business, did I discover that? Because if you didn't have an intriguing project, something that would be a good case study for a master's course, mm-hmm. Somebody who's got their PhD and multiple masters or whatever, they're not interested. And, they can be making good money, but they're going to, look elsewhere. And being ahead of your clients isn't just important for the clients, it's important for recruitment. So you discovered that with your stuff, with the technology-driven work, the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to think that the programs, that we're involved in defense, Navy, mm-hmm. And in some of the civilian agencies that we're supporting, the Census Bureau, DEA, these are programs mm-hmm. with missions that I consider to be of high national priority.
Yeah, it matters.
And I think it definitely matters. And I think most of our people feel very engaged in those missions. Mm-hmm. And the other aspect of the human capital equation mm-hmm. is continuing to provide them with career opportunities.
Yeah. See, that's why I think you're sitting there periodically posing, okay, let's double again. Reassures your employees you're not just saying they've got career opportunities, that you're not just giving them lip service?
I think so. I think sometimes, change is obviously very scary mm-hmm. For a lot of people, because a lot of people are all for growth, and they like to hear from their leadership
mm-hmm.
that we're continuing to grow. But when they see that the company has been successful growing one way, and now we're saying, okay, well, we're not going to continue doing more of the same. Mm-hmm. In order for us to continue to grow, we're actually going to go do something different. Mm-hmm. And we are going to actually, implement new systems. We're going to be more disciplined. We're actually bringing in new leadership.
And I want your timesheets right.
Yeah, exactly. where there's all these metrics.
Yeah, it's downright annoying, isn't it? When did you feel that the change between 10 to 20 or 20 to 40 or 40 to 80 was the most difficult related to that kind of metric system, internal? What do you think?
I would say the 40 to 80 mark was pretty. To be honest with you, I thought we were fairly scalable. I mean, I think early on in I'll say when I'll step back a little bit. When Sabre was about 10 to 15 million, I knew right away that I needed to transition my role and to basically build a strong operations team. And partially that was because most of our client base and employee base, moved to Southern Maryland, which is where the Naval Air Systems Command had moved, and at that time that was really our predominant customer. I had made a personal decision to stay in the Philadelphia area. And,
it's intriguing that the headquarters is still around Philly.
Right, and then basically diversify our offerings. So it was right around that time was when I knew that operations, I'll say, was not my shtick. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs really, I think that's when they sort of have that moment where they realize, it's more fun building and creating, but I'm not really good at running. So they either make one of two decisions. They'll either hire good management to sort of like take care of operations, or they'll decide it's like, hey, I got some value out of what I built so far. I'm going to cash out. Yeah. Sort of like.
Or they deny it. It goes backwards.
Or they deny it. And unfortunately, both of us have probably seen many instances of that where.
All right, now we're ready for a break again, believe it or not. But one of the key things that people can hear is that the structural piece, the procedural piece, is going to hit you again between 40 and 80. And I find a lot of folks think that, if they got between 20 and 40, that they don't need to address it again. That was a good eye-opener. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back. This is The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. We'll be right back.
Up-to-date business and financial news. Call now and get the financial information you need. 866-472-5790. 866-472-5790. The experts are here. Voice America Business Network.
If you're a struggling business trying to get to the next plateau and would like to learn more about what Aldana can do for you, log on to thegrowthstrategist.com. Listen to some of our many satisfied clients.
We called in the Growth Strategist to do a strategic analysis of our company, design an organizational structure, and improve our management team. The important point is that Aldana Ambler gets it. Her extensive experience coaching fast-growth companies has really paid off for us.
Aldana played a key role in driving the rapid growth of our company. We now have a strategic growth plan in place, obtained growth financing, have a stronger management team, and expanded our services, and are already seeing profits. Companies dealing with business growth issues couldn't ask for a better or wiser business advisor than Aldana Ambler.
What are you waiting for? Call 1-888-ALDANA today and see where your business can go tomorrow. Once again, that number is 1-888-ALDONNA. TheGrowthStrategist.com. Achieving accelerated growth with sustained profitability.
Network marketing is of vital importance in today's business economy. What if you could have direct education from an outstanding and successful master coach who's inspired hundreds of successful individuals across the country? Tune in to Creating the Energy of Success, the Network Marketer's Guide to Wealth with Frank Mallender, the wise coach who has worked with successful distributors from 6 of the major network marketing companies as well as Fortune 500 companies. Listen Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern, on the Voice America Variety Channel.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You're logged on to The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. Call in right now with your questions and comments toll free at 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. Now let's jump into another segment of The Growth Strategist Here's Aldana Ambler.
Welcome back to the show. This is the growth strategist, Aldana Ambler, and today we're talking about keep on doubling. And our guest is Phil Harigi, and he is the CEO of Sabre Systems. And this is a $75 million, 600-plus employee company that has big contracts, that are around the engineering and the technology, IT kind of side of things. And they compete against the big guys. They have big government contracts and a premier list of customers. We're talking about the defense system and the census and places like that. So, they have to know what they're doing. And what I'm asking Phil to talk about is this journey from 20 to 40 to 80 to 160. So a lot of the things we've talked about so far have been people-related issues. What was the biggest challenge, say, for your management team, a key hire that you had to do a few times? Was there one that you had to hire and then refill and refill and refill like a lot of people?
Well, I think that's probably one of the tougher decisions that you have to make is that I think when you're at the smaller size, 10 million, 20 million, it's very easy to not know, I'll say, what an A player looks like, if you're only, I'll say, looking at 40 million, because what an A player looks like at, say, 40 million is different than what an A player looks like at 80 million versus what an A player looks like at, say, 150 million. So
that's funny because an A player, for a big company, looks obnoxious and can push you to the $20 million CEO, right?
Exactly. Well, at least certainly the stereotypes of what that CEO looks like. But I like to think that we've been very fortunate. But what happens, I think, as companies grow, and especially as you have senior leadership, that's been with a company, almost, either at the beginning or near the beginning, you do have a mentality where some are just kind of content with the lifestyle. Some become a little bit more focused on control issues, and some are very adamant against change. They have that rear view mentality that I think that we spoke about. So I think when you have a commitment, and I think as you mentioned in your intro, I do a lot of studying. I feel like that my job is one of the key jobs I do is to really look at sort of like the field of players out there. Look at the companies that have made that jump, almost like that hyperspace jump, like say from 75 million, which is roughly where we are, to 150, 200 million. What did they do? And I look at the strategies that fail just as much as I do as the strategies that succeed.
Now, if I'm hearing you right, you had those kind of questions and had to make some personnel changes kind of across all the roles. You didn't say back, the sales management was a place we had to do 6 different people, or the controller had to be replaced 4 times. You're basically, if I'm inferring it right, it's been something you've had to do across the board.
Pretty much across the board, because I think it's one of those things that you have people in positions and you sort of go through it. And my style is sort of like a participative management style. I want people to feel that they're part, very much a part of the change process, so that they can understand that this isn't Phil who went to like a 1-week boot camp and came back with all these crazy ideas.
Oh, God. It can seem like that, though, can't it?
It can seem that. But I think, when you engage the process and you can actually show some case studies of, well, here's how company A did it, and this is what, the strategic moves that they made, and here's how company B did it, and here's how company X did it, and they fell flat on their face. And
you know what I find tricky about that is I've seen some clients want me to find them the exact case study that, for their exact situation, and it's just about impossible to find the precise thing.
Yeah.
And then to want to copy somebody else, that's not right either.
Well, because what you've built, what the capabilities, I guess, when you're doing sort of like that SWOT analysis across the board, the strengths and weaknesses that you have are very unique to your own company.
Yeah.
You get, what was a company that had the same strengths and weaknesses as us, and the same? It's almost like, people kid me because I make a lot of sports analogies, but it's like a football team.
It does help. It does help. If you've got a guy who's injured, his left ankle, that's your unique situation that changes a little bit of the formula. Now, I want to shift a little bit to the money situation. Have you changed how you're financed over the years at the different stages, or not?
Well, I'll say that we're still primarily senior debt, financed, but I guess certainly in the early stages of the business, we were on a sort of like on an asset-based formula because we're services. We don't have a lot of tangible assets. We don't sell goods. We don't have inventory. We don't have plant and equipment. So our receivables, was our primary assets.
Yeah.
So we went on on a formula that was tied to the percentage of our outstanding receivables. So that's sort of matured, to sort of like a cash flow, based of instrument now, but certainly part of the next strategy. And this is part of, I'll say, preparing the company for, I'll say, the cultural changes that are sort of implied when you bring in an outside investor.
Are you thinking about that, or have you done that?
Well, certainly, because we've now formally introduced acquisition, as the next key component to our.
I love that
business.
stage.
And because everything we've done so far has been organically based, and again, going to my football analogy, that's sort of like the ground game, moving the chains forward. But if you want that vertical, that big pop, it's finding that acquisition.
That is the long ball. You just don't want it to be the Hail Mary.
Yeah, well, I think what you want to do is in the West Coast offense, you want a lot of yards after the catch. Maybe you're not going for the big pop, but something where it's 15 yards, but then a lot of yards after the catch. So there's another football analogy.
Yeah, I think we've been watching too much Super Bowl. I know.
So.
I was rooting for the Saints, and I was so excited.
but I think that's the part of the acquisition strategy is going to require obviously capital, and we've actually formally stood up an acquisition review board within Sabre to sort of like highlight the notion that this is not just something that hey, we go to cocktail parties and we see companies that we sort of like and might be interesting and might be a good candidate. So we've added a lot of rigor to our organic development process, with the formal capture management.
So you're laying out like criteria for acquisition.
Right, exactly. The screening criteria, and also giving the reality checks because, for right now, I'll say our first acquisition, we'd like to be able to do still with senior financing, successfully integrate that, and then when we successfully have a track record that shows a successful acquisition integration, then I think you can go to the to the private markets and say, hey, we're ready to go after number 2, ready to take a bigger chunk. We've successfully acquired and integrated one, and so that's sort of the progression that we see over the.
And a lot of companies that sound like you're sounding, in a way, their growth has been financed on landing big accounts. And it's almost like cash flow management becomes king because, when you land a big account, it sounds great because you've got this, the contract. But you also have the upfront cost of having to make sure that you've got enough people, and you've got to really push toward the beginning of a lot of these big contracts. And the cash outlay is pretty stiff sometimes. So the cash management becomes, they say cash is king. Did you find that was the case for you for several years?
For several years, and I think it was very helpful, having, it's one of the key relationships I think that any business can have. You have your key customer relationships, your employee relationships, but your financing partner is a strategic relationship.
Yep. The line of credit mattered.
And the line of credit matters, and understanding, and and we've gone through stages where there have been budget impasses between the president and Congress. That sometimes it's very frustrating dealing with the red tape that comes with working with the government and dealing with slow receivables. And what I tell people is that if I happen to have the luxury of of working for a customer that is the only entity allowed to print its own money. Mm-hmm. So we call it the deficit. You and I do that, so we get in trouble. But having a bank and having a lender relationship, that is attuned, and because I think they live in the world of no surprises. So whether your next quarter is good or bad, communicating that.
Well, your credibility depends on your capacity to really make good projections that, you come pretty close. And the better and better you hit them, the more credible you are. So one of the reasons I pointed that out is some people who are listening, they have a little bit of a different management style or a situation. They might not be able to be kind of sales-driven or large account acquisition-driven. But you got to know, I think, what drives the business, what drives the profitability of it, so that when you go to another scale, you can really refine the systems that are most relevant to yourselves. So if you're sales-driven, big account-driven, cash-driven, line of credit-driven, what's the sales manager? What's the sales process like? How accurate is your pipeline? Because it's going to matter. Did you find you had to change the sales process and get better routine and better projections and get other people involved with, like proposals as you went along, or did you leave that basically the same?
No, I think, you hit on one of the key, I'll say, change, inflection points of the company was that, we sort of live and die in our business on the proposal.
Yeah.
And in our business, there's a difference between, how you succeed in the small business set-aside market. But then once you get into, I'll say, anywhere between 25 to 40 million is right around the time when you have to start competing with the big guys. So you almost kind of get into a situation where, up until about 30 million, 35 million, I'm competing with other $20, $25 million companies, and then all of a sudden, you're sort of like thrown in the deep end of the pool, and now I'm competing against Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. So focus, maybe having some real, heart-to-heart talks with yourself and your team about what is it that we really do well.
Yeah.
Because we can't, we maybe came from a situation where we can try to be all things to everybody to we really have to sort of like narrow our focus and understand, because when you do the SWOT, it's you come out with completely different results. So
okay, now I need to do a break. We're going to come back, and I want to get us into the room talking about what is it like to say, okay, let's double again.
Okay.
This is The Growth Strategist with Donna Ambler. We'll be right back with Phil Harigi of Sabre Systems.
Stocks, bonds, investment opportunities, financial news, and talk. We can help. Call us now toll-free, 866-472-5790, 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
If you're a struggling business trying to get to the next plateau and would like to learn more about what Aldana can do for you, log on to thegrowthstrategist.com. Listen to some of our many satisfied clients.
We called in the Growth Strategist to do a strategic analysis of our company, design an organizational structure, and improve our management team. The important point is that Aldana Ambler gets it. Her extensive experience coaching fast-growth companies has really paid off for us.
Aldana played a key role in driving the rapid growth of our company. We now have a strategic growth plan in place, obtained growth financing, have a stronger management team, and expanded our services, and are already seeing profits. Companies dealing with business growth issues couldn't ask for a better or wiser business advisor than Aldana Ambler.
What are you waiting for? Call 1-888-ALDANA today and see where your business can go tomorrow. Once again, that number is 1-888-ALDONNA. TheGrowthStrategist.com. Achieving accelerated growth with sustained profitability.
Here's a show for baseball players, coaches, parents, and those who love the game. At least 90% of sports success, including baseball, requires mental strength in order to fully benefit from technical ability, and the higher the competition level, the more critical it becomes to possess mental muscle. Tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time to Championship Thinking, hosted by Jim Meyer, and brought to you by the National High School Baseball Coaches Association. Jim, sports psychology coach, trainer, and author of numerous articles and the workbook, Championship Thinking, Building Mental Muscle in Baseball, simplifies the mental game with easy-to-understand tools and tips. With his weekly guests, Jim draws from successes with professionals, college, high school, and youth teams, coaches, and players. Learn how to remain confident and focused at crunch time, when pressure, tension, and anxiety like to make an uninvited appearance. Tune in and tune up your mental and technical knowledge and skills with Championship Thinking every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, right here on America's Voice, Voice America.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You're logged on to The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. Call in right now with your questions and comments toll free at 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. Now let's jump into another segment of The Growth Strategist. Here's Aldana Ambler.
Welcome back to the show. This is The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler, and today we're talking about keep on doubling. And my guest is Phil Harigi of Sabre Systems. And what I'd like to do is two things. I want to make sure that you give them some contact information for you because you built their curiosity. I want to make sure listeners can reach you. Where could they reach you, Phil?
Oh, sure. Well, our website is www.sabresystems. That's S-A-B-R-E systems.com, and my email is pharigi, J-A-U-R-I-G-U-E, @sabresystems.com.
Wonderful. And if people know my name, it's pretty easy to get me. The email is aldana@ambler.com, A-L-D-O-N-N-A, @ambler.com. And in the United States, the toll-free number is 1-888-ALDANA. With the multiple companies that I owned, I just had too many telephone numbers. So if you're dealing directly with me, that's the number you use. Now, I think we're going to get some questions about this because some folks are saying, I don't know if I can get past the 20 million. I'm scared of 80, et cetera, et cetera. So I want you to put us into the room, Phil. How often do you say, let's talk about doubling again?
I guess, I have leadership meetings, on a quarterly basis. And I'll say when those quarterly meetings are really sort of like to kind of take the pulse of the organization, but the communications on a really almost occur on a real time basis. But I think quarterly is what we're using to sort of like let's see where we are, because a lot of times you make strategy, it's based on assumptions, and you can't continue to operate and proceed if you determine that maybe your assumptions were incorrect.
Well, when people think they're supposed to be talking strategy every day, I think they're in trouble because it's like asking the centipede how it walks and it gets all tripped up.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to shut up and execute,
Yeah, I think that's exactly where we are right now at this moment in time, is we've spent a lot of time, sort of like, I guess one, even before strategy, is we kind of like looked at the team, and said, what is the team that I need to almost implement any strategy? So that sort of like comes from the Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus mode, and then start of, really looking at, what have we got and where can we go with what we got and where do we want to be?
Well, that was profound. Some people don't. No, some people don't do that. They'll say, let's double, and then they look around the room. And half of them are not motivated to double, so they spend a lot of the time kind of arguing about it or fighting with the personalities or the personal needs. I
think once, you get a census, the people who really aren't comfortable, I'll say end up, deselecting themselves. They recognize that, I think this is absolutely the right way to go, but I just don't, have the gumption.
Or I'm not ready for this, or whatever they say. Yeah. That's important for people to hear, is that, take a pulse of folks' readiness to double again, and do they want to be the ones helping lead the charge and figure it out? And sometimes they don't.
I think that's absolutely the case, and I think you get to a point where, once you sort of have sort of like looked at the strategy, now every 2 years we'll re-baseline it and and sort of like roll it forward to the next 5 years. But in the meantime, we're a company because of our I'll say geographic dispersion. We absolutely need to have a collaborative culture within the company that requires almost constant communication and contact and sharing of knowledge, because in most businesses it's you're going to succeed on the quantity and quality of your business intelligence.
Now, do people know that you're basically a keep on doubling leader, and they count on that?
I think so. I think it's pretty clear that a lot of companies are, in our stage, actually become acquisition targets themselves.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you that. That was one of my last questions. Is 60 to 75 million is like a black hole for service firms.
Yeah. And I think it's one is you need to convince sort of like the team that hey, I'm still in it for the long haul. I'd like to think I'm still relatively young, even though I don't feel young when I go into meetings anymore. But that I'm in it for the long haul, and that in spite of what you see in industry with a lot of companies our size, agreeing to become acquired. We're not that, and I think it's either because we're making it very clear in a very visible way that we intend to be an acquirer and consolidator in this industry.
And there is the behavior right there. It's a mindset of, if you're considering how can we double, how can we keep going, you're not as much of an acquisition target, because that behavior isn't necessarily what someone's going to want. They want to be able to buy the system, some of the followers, some of the implementers, and be the ones that tell them what to do, not hire the ones that are going to be continuing to do that. They want to buy you out and get you out of there. So you're not going to be as much of a candidate.
The ironic thing is that whether you're a buyer or a seller, you end up having to do a lot of the same things within your company. It's just sort of like, well, if you're going to put your house on the market, you'd probably start spending a lot of money sprucing it up. So it's almost like you when you start going through the same motions that a seller does, it does maybe cast some doubt as to what your true intentions are.
And one of the things I've seen, particularly for service businesses, is around 80. What you're talking about right here is you don't know if you're going to be acquiring or acquired, because a huge corporation may have you as a subsidiary, a solely owned subsidiary. You can still have a lot of independence. You just have a different financing arm and a marketing umbrella. And, so you may feel the same way, just funded differently. It's like the difference of, you're going to be self-funded versus you've got a line of credit, then you got venture capital. And it's just a change in finance. And sometimes it doesn't change the dynamic of how it's run. It's fascinating that way.
It is fascinating. And I think
not dull.
And but I think most of I'll say the tier one companies in our space tend to integrate, as opposed to leave. And also, it's one of those things that, we spent a fair amount of time and energy and sort of promoting, I'll say, the Sabre brand.
Oh,